Battletoads is a wacky action game about amphibian brawlers trying to rescue their buddy, and obviously a princess, from the villainous evil Jessica Rabbit. And it's also colloquially known as that game that's really hard. I heard a rumor once that the game was created specifically because someone said Nintendo games are too hard, and they wanted to really amp it up. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds like something an asshole would do, and this is the kind of game an asshole would make, so... The game starts out deceptively simple to the point that it has to be intentionally insulting you because the game knows what's coming next. It steadily increases difficulty up through the third stage, the Turbo Tunnel. Then, there's the jet bikes. Almost everyone I've met who's played this game has told me that it's the last screen of the game they've ever seen. The bike section is an absolute marathon of attentiveness that they realize really fucked people up, because they put 3 more vehicle sections in the game, culminating in the penultimate level, Clinger Winger, which is so nightmare-inducing that I can only describe it as apocalyptic. It's not all cake outside the vehicle stages, though. The 4th level, Arctic Caverns, is about the closest I'll ever get to being cursed by a gypsy. The ice makes you flail around like Jack Tripper in the Three's Company intro, while snowmen dead-eye you out of nowhere with snowballs. Obviously, the game was getting a little too playable, because then they threw some instant death spikes into the mix. I've never seen the end of this level, and I don't lose sleep about it, because the only way I could hate this stage more is if I had to escort someone through it. Also, there's that old adage that water levels are the hardest levels. Well, that's actually not true here, but the level 8 Terratubes are kind of the peak of the game's asshole spectrum, but I'll elaborate on that later. The later levels all start having unique gimmicks to them, which would keep the game fresh if anyone ever fucking saw them. Level 10 Rat Race consists of exactly what you think it does, and the third portion of this level is so unbalanced that I've never come close to beating it. Luckily, there's an exploit to get out of there quick. Then, of course, the Clinger Winger. If the levels of this game are Herculean tasks, then this level has to be capturing Cerberus. Or whatever the hardest one was. I'm not an expert, but you get the gist. There's absolutely no room for error, and it's not even clear how the level even works. You literally have to fly by the seat of your pants. This face was the same face I was making. I will say, though, that the music in this stage is intense. In fact, the entire soundtrack fits the levels well and really adds to the charm in front of the game. I'm not ashamed to admit that on the cart, the farthest I've ever gotten in this game is level 6 by the grace of God and warp points. Yeah, there are actually warp points, which send you 2 levels ahead, because it wouldn't be fair if you didn't get a chance to get dominated by every level equally. There are a total of 4 warps, and they're super easy to get to. I'm joking, it's unbearable. The first one is literally on the second screen of the game, and the absolute speed required to hit it means you're never going to see it, unless you're incredibly deliberate. The next is in the Turbo Tunnel, and it's at the very end, and you have to run into a wall to hit it. The third is in the Arctic Caverns, of course, so I have no idea where the fuck it is. The fourth is particularly hilarious because it's in level 6, and you have to jump into oblivion and just hope for the best. I actually created my own warp in that one by dying my way into the next level. That's a metaphor. And then, the bosses. Lazy designs and lazy actions across the board. Big Blarg is just a fat rat, that's the whole twist. Even the Dark Queen is fucked up, her cape isn't attached to anything. Look! And they didn't even try with this coloring job. Then, after the absolute sadism of Clinger Winger, you fight Circle. Yeah, I've literally only ever seen this character referred to as Circle. To be honest, I just couldn't clear the Clinger Winger. My thumb is still sore. The recordings of my attempts of it are almost double in length of every other stage I recorded. What Battletoads is, more than anything, is a masterclass in memorization. In pure numbers, you get 4 continues, 4 lives to each continue, and 6 hit points to each life. By pressing down, BA, and start at the title and continue screens, you can increase your lives to 6. There are a few scattered 1-ups lying around, but most of them are harder to get than they're worth. Usually I can manage to gain a few extra lives across the course of a continue, so we'll say 30 lives total. That's 30 attempts to beat the game before you have to start all over. Now, the game is negative reinforcement at its finest, so those 30 lives are spent almost always learning the correct pattern to hopefully get to the next portion of the next run so you can learn a little bit more about it and then rinse and repeat. This is incredibly monotonous, but in those days, games couldn't be very long. They just couldn't handle it on a physical level. They wanted to make sure you got your money's worth out of a game, so they made it difficult so you'd keep on playing. Well, I guess it worked because I've been playing this fucking game for 20 years and I'd never seen the 4th level. Still wish I hadn't, to be quite honest. My problem with it though, and level 9 Terratubes is a fine example, is that there's just too much stuff designed to kill you on the first time. Instantly you're killed by the first enemy before you even see it, and you're back to the beginning of the game. You didn't even get a chance to learn anything. So the whole concept is you have to die to learn how to play. It's like 90s Dark Souls. Now, Mega Man games are like this, and very pattern-based as well, but there's one big difference between Mega Man and Battletoads. Mega Man games have password systems. You can't keep trying at Battletoads. Each attempt is separated by several minutes of turbo tunnel, and if you're unlucky enough to miss the warp, Arctic caverns. And if you think a second player helps you, oh boy. The biggest practical joke in the history of gaming is the option for a second player in Battletoads. You hurt each other, and when one of you dies, you both start back. Also, literally impossible to beat the Clinger Winger because of the glitch. Second vehicle never moves. Here's what blows my mind about that. Someone got far enough in 2-player mode to figure that out. Now, the NES wasn't the only system to be graced with the first game. There was a Game Boy port too. But it isn't the one that came out when the NES game did. The actual Game Boy port didn't come out until 1994, oddly enough, and was called Battletoads in Ragnarok World. It's a pretty decent handheld port, music holds up fine. Not a lot to say really other than that. It cuts nearly half the levels out of the cart, but it doesn't manage to cut out Arctic caverns, so fuck it. Game Gear version is almost a weird art film version of the game, in a way I can't quite describe. Everything's a little different and off. Like seriously, let's take a look at this. Okay, we're at the turbo tunnel, and let's get started. Okay, dead seconds later. Are you fucking shitting me? What kind of 0 to 100 shit is that? And then look at this. Where was that in the main game? The Genesis version is the closest to the NES. Obviously it's a little prettier to look at, and the soundtrack gets that Genesis signature 9-inch nails sound. But it's pretty much exactly the same. They did lower the difficulty quite a bit, especially in the vehicle portion, and you do start with max lives, but oddly that doesn't make the game any better because I had way more new issues than any of the ones that fixed from the NES version. Jumping is an absolute disaster. It somehow feels like you're both underwater and weigh 16 tons, and the controls just aren't as precise. You still can, thankfully, kick the shit out of your best friend, just like in the original. Overall, I think the NES version is obviously the best, and one of my favorite games of all time. I haven't played it all these years because it's difficult. I played it because it's fun, and no matter how frustrating it is, I want to keep on playing it. Except Arctic Caverns. Fuck the Arctic Caverns.